Fuck you, nigga, 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 fucking, you a nigga officer. Fuck you, nigga, 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 I hate you, nigga, 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 fuck you, nigga, nigga.
How you gonna teach old dog new tricks? How you gonna learn some new tricks?
You call him an old dog. Well,
no, you are still agitating. I didn't say that.
No, he called you. I heard it. Didn't he say it?
What you mean a dog? You didn't call me a dog. You say you can't teach
He
dogs.
said an old dog, new tricks. He calls you a bear half the time.
I'm a what now?
He told me at the camp that you sleep with a teddy bear in your bed. Now, I don't make these things up, you know.
That's what he said.
This guy tells me this.
Let's be friends for 1 minute just to get him.
No, come on. Please, come on. No, come on. No. This is my good...
Let's show him something.
Oh, what?
Let's show him.
No, I really don't think this is necessary. What time is it? It's,
Let me tell you something.
Oh, no!
Let me tell you something.
Wait, can I say something?
Let me tell you something.
I must tell
I
you.
want to tell you one thing. All of the brothers out there watching television,
Yeah.
I don't care how mad y'all to each other, when it's come to one of these fellas trying to divide us, we must unite.
Oh, God. Wait a minute. Wait.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live back again with another episode of The Forecast. So recently, we all saw Bill Cosby actually get convicted. And the judge sentenced him to 3 to 10 years. And he has to do a minimum of 3 years. And they might even try to make him do all 10. We saw what they did to OJ. All O.J. Simpson did was steal his own football cards. Bill Cosby was accused of sexually assaulting a white woman. And when you living in a system of white supremacy, you could even say they went easy on Bill Cosby. But for me, at this point in history, you need more evidence than a white woman's story to convince me. Just based off history, white women have always used rape as a weapon against black men. They would tell them that if they don't do what they say, they'll falsely accuse them of rape. And you'll probably end up castrated. I mean, white women have gotten black cities burnt to the ground. Tulsa, Oklahoma, what happened in Black Wall Street? It started because a white girl said some black man touched her in the elevator. The massacre in Rosewood, Florida. It started because some white girl said a black man raped her, so they killed all the black people in the town. And it also had to do with the hatred that they had for seeing them prosper without white people. But the catalyst was a white woman lying about rape or lying about being assaulted. This year alone, there have been 2 white women arrested for falsely accusing black men. Now, they might not get that much of a punishment, but that is one improvement we can thank our ancestors for. 50 or 60 years ago, that would have ended up as another Emmett Till. But at the same time, that white woman, Carolyn Bryant, will never be arrested. She'll probably never see a cop again for the rest of her life if she's still alive. But there's no statute of limitation for murder or accessory to murder. And it wouldn't be double jeopardy because they never charged her. With Bill Cosby, they called the first trial a mistrial, and they did it again and hit him with the charges on the last possible day that they could. And they labeled this 81-year-old man going blind as a violent sexual predator. And he definitely can't move like he did in 1978. And the judge was even talking down to him, pulling out Bible scriptures and all. And he was getting so much pleasure from telling them how much of a fall from grace it was. And that no one is above the law. And you had Gloria Allred and all of the accusers out there celebrating. And meanwhile, you have this 34-year-old white boy, Justin Schneider. He kidnapped a woman, choked her until she was unconscious, and then masturbated on her. And then the judge gives this white boy a free pass.
KTVA 11's Daniela Rivera joins us with the outcome of the case stemming from a graphic sexually motivated assault in August of last year. Daniela.
Well, Joe, we do want to warn our viewers tonight that the details of this case, they are graphic, and they might be upsetting to even our adult viewers. When given the opportunity to speak today, Mr. Schneider said nothing about the impact his actions might have had on his victim, but highlighted the positive effect this case has had on his life.
This can never happen again.
The outcome of Justin Schneider's case is, in a word used by Judge Michael Corey, breathtaking. He was charged after a woman told Anchorage police Schneider offered her a ride from the gas station in Minnesota and Spenard to Muldoon, but instead brought her here, a dead end in a residential Turnagain neighborhood, where he choked her unconscious. The victim saying she thought she was going to die, then awoke to find Schneider had masturbated on her. According to court documents, she told police Schneider said he was never going to kill her. He just needed her to think that in order to achieve satisfaction.
We tried to call and call are not available. That was the message, though reasonable attempts to make victim contact was made.
Today, his victim is absent from the courtroom, and so is any mention of remorse.
I would just like to emphasize how grateful I am for this process. It has given me a year to really work on myself and become a better person and a better husband and a better father, and I'm very eager to continue that journey.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate those comments.
Schneider struck a deal with the state, a 2-year sentence with 1 suspended, but he'll get credit for the year he spent at home with his wife and children on an ankle monitor. Prosecutor Andrew Granick says he agreed to the deal based on Schneider's enrollment and progress in a treatment program and an expert's assessment that the risk of Schneider reoffending is low.
I hope it doesn't happen. That's the reason why I made the deal that I've made, because I have reasonable expectations that it will not happen. But I would like the gentleman to be on notice that that is one pass. It's not really a pass, but given the conduct, one might consider that it is.
Judge Corey accepted the deal, noting his decision was based on a hope of rehabilitation.
Mr. Schneider is going to be a member of our community, and he will not be in jail for the rest of his life, even if had been convicted on all of the counts for which he was charged.
In the end, Schneider's victim could not be found and had no voice in the deal struck by the state. Whether she has ever recovered from the attack is unknown. But for Justin Schneider, his ordeal is over. According to court documents, after the assault, Schneider went to work at his job as an air traffic controller at Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport. In court today, the prosecutor said he has lost that job and cannot work for the federal government again, something he called a life sentence. Joe?
Daniela, why wasn't Schneider required to register as a sex offender?
Well, the prosecutor said that's because he was never actually charged with a sexual offense. Even though the crime seemed sexually motivated, the case didn't meet the legal standards to be considered a sexual assault. The charges he was indicted on were assault, kidnapping, and harassment.
Now, this white boy, Justin Schneider, who isn't rich, because they love to say, well, it's the difference between rich and poor, not black and white. Well, Justin Schneider isn't rich beyond having the complexion for the protection. He has a regular job. Bill Cosby had a fortune, yet he was convicted. And this white boy, Justin Schneider, who is your average everyday white boy, and he gets a pass. Even though he actually admitted to the crime, the judge said, I'll let you go this time. Just don't do it again. This man who had held somebody against their will, choked them out against their will until they passed out, and then masturbated on them. They couldn't charge that as a sexual crime. And this white dude said, I needed her to feel like she was going to die. That was the only way I could get off. It's literally the same thing, except Bill Cosby didn't choke her out. She said he used pills. But they never called this 34-year-old white boy a violent sexual predator. He didn't even have to register as a sex offender. He got 1 year of probation, which they said he already did during the trial. And then he suspended his 2nd year, saying he hoped he got rehabilitated. He didn't have Bill Cosby money. He had the complexion for the protection. And even if you try to say they did it to send a message to the rich, even though Bill Cosby is the only rich person convicted, I don't know who else they even charged, even though people admitted to molesting children. There is a 79-year-old white boy, Lyle Burgess, who got caught raping a 5-year-old.
Bill Burgess pleaded no contest to felony statutory rape of a girl who is now just 7 years old. The longtime Stockton businessman was sentenced on Wednesday to just 90 days house arrest detention and 5 years of informal probation. He does not have to register as a sex offender.
A 5-6-year-old little girl was molested. Normally the sentence is state prison, and then when you're released, you have to register as a sex offender.
Fox 40 reached out to Deputy District Attorney Kathy Murray to find out why Burgess was charged with just statutory rape and why he wouldn't have to register as a sex offender. Murray deferred us to the media person who instructed us to put our questions in writing online. We haven't heard back yet.
Future victims are not protected.
We also went to Burgess's home in an upscale gated community in Stockton. Sorry, we just wanted to give him the courtesy that we're doing a story, and if he had any comment at all, we wanted to make sure we reflected his side because we're talking to the other side as well. No comment from the family at all? No comment. Okay.
He's obviously very wealthy, and it's just an example of how the wealthy people, time and time again, escape the penalty for what they did.
Burgess founded Rare Parts, Inc., an automotive parts manufacturer and distributor.
They trusted this man. He was a family friend, and he took advantage of him.
Maleko says the sex assault happened after the family was invited over to Burgess's Calaveras County cabin back in 2016. As far as how the young victim is doing now,
The girl is not doing good. She's showing all the symptoms of somebody who's been molested. She's in counseling, and she's going to be in counseling all her life.
Now, this 79-year-old white boy, Lyle Burgess, actually molested a 5-year-old, a family friend who the parents trusted. He was convicted and got 90 days probation. And they only convicted him of statutory rape, not molesting a 5-year-old. As if this 5-year-old consented, like this is a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old. This man was 79, and this little girl was 5 years old. And of course, he was not labeled a violent sex offender. And he, just like Justin Schneider, does not have to register as a sex offender. And it's not just because he's wealthy, it's because he has the complexion for the protection. Bill Cosby was rich. He was building wealth. He just didn't have the complexion for the protection. But at the end of the day, to black men, I don't understand how a lot of us still fall for the same traps over and over. With Bill Cosby, not to even mention that he was married, after all this time and everything that has happened, how could you still trust that situation? Historically, white women have been very dangerous to us, and a lot of us have gotten killed. Not only black men, but black women too. At some point, we might have to start listening to our sisters about that. Historically, they have used rape against us, and we have paid over and over and over again. And yet we as black men and black people as a whole still cape for white women so much. We let them play both sides of the fence. They talk about a patriarchal society because white men are at the top in this society. But we ignore them calling themselves minorities. Then they can just come in and take all the resources our ancestors fought for in the civil rights movement. White women have benefited the most from the civil rights movement. All that money Martin Luther King was generating from the government based off the civil rights movement in the 70s, they just ended up giving it to the feminists, to white women. But in this society, you can't talk about men and women being equal. When have black men ever had more power than white women in America? We were never higher on the social level than white women have been. Until the justice system is equal between black men and white women, they can't talk to me about equality and justice. Right now, today, a white woman can break into your house and shoot you and probably get away with it.
In America, protesting a police murder lands activists more jail time than the murderer.
Protests continue in the wake of the shooting and killing of a 26-year-old black man in his own apartment by a white Dallas police officer. The officer, Amber Geiger, has been charged with manslaughter after she entered Botham Shemjan's apartment less than 2 weeks ago and opened fire, killing him. Police claim the officer believed that his apartment was hers.
Now the police have found marijuana in Botham Jean's apartment. Typical. Botham Jean's death at the hands of the police made him a criminal, just like many black men who were killed by the police before him. If you want to better understand our broken two-tiered criminal justice system, look no further than the treatment of Amber Geiger, who was released an hour after killing Botham Jean, versus the 9 peaceful protesters who were arrested last night in Dallas and still haven't been released. This is the double standard. Amber can kill her neighbor with a service weapon and change her story multiple times and still get released for good behavior until she's arrested 3 days later, while her cop buddies try and paint the victim as a criminal for allegedly possessing a decriminalized substance that will soon be legal in every state. But those peacefully protesting this injustice, well, they're thrown in jail for longer than the murderer. Now understand the priorities here for a second. When a cop murders an innocent black man in his own home, police work overtime to beef up her defense and prove her innocence.
So this was the plan from the Dallas PD investigators from the beginning, is to look for ways to incriminate the person they just killed.
When people protest this fact, they're swiftly arrested and don't get released. Surprised? Well, you shouldn't be.
This is the normal playbook from American policing. When they're accused of criminal behavior themselves, the first step of cases is to criminalize the victim.
This is exactly why no one was shocked after an investigation found that Baltimore police officers carry toy guns around so that if they end up killing someone, they can just plant one on the victim. This is exactly why a Florida police chief can tell his officers to just pin unsolved crimes on random innocent black people. Amber Geiger is already out on a $300,000 bond, free to move out of her apartment and get a fair trial. Botham Jean, on the other hand, is dead. Those who are protesting injustice are still in jail as I'm writing this. If you can't see this double standard, you also probably can't understand how George Zimmerman is now going around signing Skittles wearing a Confederate flag t-shirt commemorating the death of his victim, Trayvon Martin, another innocent black teen slain for wearing a hoodie. Just another story where an innocent slain black teenager was portrayed as a criminal post-mortem. This is what happens when we criminalize being black and we paint their murderers as heroes. Even if a police officer walks into someone else's apartment and kills the resident in cold blood, the cop still has a chance of tasting freedom. And those who demand accountability get locked away swiftly because they're a nuisance.
But we as black men feeding into the gender wars allow white women to play both sides of the fence. And it's not just black men, it's black people in general. We let them play both sides of the fence. But until we actually do get on code, we're still going to be subject to their laws, their rules, and their punishments. And there's nothing we can do about it. At the end of the day, it's on us to figure out when it's going to stop.
A group of Alaska residents are trying to take a judge off the bench after a controversial sentence. 34-year-old Justin Schneider kidnapped a woman, strangled her until she was unconscious, and then masturbated on her. The incident occurred in August of 2017. Schneider accepted a plea deal last week, which includes no additional jail time. It also credited him for the year he spent at home with an ankle monitor while the case was pending. He was not required to register as a sex offender. Schneider did not apologize for his actions, but thanked the judge for accepting the deal.
I would just like to emphasize how grateful I am for this process. It has given me a year to really work on myself and become a better person and a better husband and a better father, and I'm very eager to continue that journey.
Attorney Jesse Weber joins me now to talk more about this. So, Jesse, I think people hearing the facts of this case will scratch their heads and say, how did the judicial system allow this to happen?
Pretty incredible. I can't believe we are talking about it. But from a legal perspective, it makes sense, even though the law sometimes doesn't make common sense. So he was charged with multiple counts, including kidnapping and harassment, which carries significant prison terms. But the DA made a decision. They said, if we take this to trial, we're probably going to lose. The kidnapping charge, she willingly entered into the car with him and willingly went to the area where she was ultimately assaulted. So they made the decision that we're not going to take this to trial. We're probably going to lose. Okay, let's do a plea deal. You're going to plead to the second highest crime, the second-degree assault, which is a Class B felony in Alaska. Sounds pretty serious. But for somebody like him, who has no criminal record, the most he could face, 2 years in prison. Now, one of those years, as you talked about, he was under house arrest. The next year was suspended. People are like, what does that mean? Yeah. Why suspended? Right. Well, it was suspended because based upon the guidelines in sentencing in Alaska, which shows there's a deficit in the judicial process there, if a person who has no criminal record and is prone to rehabilitation, the judge and the district attorney can decide, well, you know what? He doesn't have to go to jail. And that's what they decided here.
So is that the reason, basically, that the judge gave for that ruling?
They feel that he can be rehabilitated. But the major problem is this act is not a sex crime. And that's the problem. That's a problem with the legislator. Now, in one sense, it's a good thing that they never thought about this being a sex crime. On the other hand, this needs to change. These kinds of acts, if you look at the definition of what is touching, how is this not touching someone.
Right.
They're going to have to change that. That's the recommendation that they actually have to follow through with.
So disturbing. But what is the significance of this ruling, especially given the current political climate?
This is the height of the Me Too movement. We see it in and out of the news. We're talking about Judge Kavanaugh maybe not getting on the Supreme Court because of this very instance. So we have a guy who assaulted a woman in a sexual manner, and that can't be classified as a sex crime. This just shows a major deficit in the judicial process.
You know, Art, we have received so many questions and so many concerns from people who are just now hearing about this case and really the horrific details that are in these court documents. We may never know what went into this jury's decision, but we do know that now a convicted rapist will not be going to prison.
The message is disturbing.
Imagine going to the hospital for help with your asthma. You're under sedation and tethered to machines. Then you're raped. And as you try to call for help, you realize the call button to the nurse's station has been disabled.
People trust their doctors. People expect their doctors to take care of them.
Dr. Shafiq Sheikh was just found guilty of raping a woman back in 2013. Prosecutors urged jurors to sentence him to 20 years in prison. Instead, jurors decided on 10 years of probation, no jail time.
Did they really believe that she consented or not? Maybe some of the members of the jury still had doubts about that.
The judge has sealed the names of the 5 women and 7 men on the jury.
He's obviously not going to practice medicine again.
A Dallas City councilman described police, quote, gunning down residents in his opposition to pay raises for public safety employees.
Yeah, Councilman Lee Kleinman was referring to the Botham Jean shooting when he argued that across-the-board raises would reward the kind of police behavior citizens have been protesting. The Dallas Police Association is furious about the remarks. Fox 4's Lori Brown live at City Hall with the story. Lori.
Brandon, the Dallas Police Association president said that he's concerned that the comments from City Councilman Lee Kleinman could incite violence against police. Here's what the councilman had to say today before his colleagues approved pay raises for police and fire.
In a time right now when our community is really hurting, when our community is in the streets asking for justice, it just does not seem appropriate to reward that kind of behavior with an increase across the board. If you look at the number of arrests that have gone on in our police department this year, and then of course this horrible and horrifying incident that we've had down in the Cedars, how can we stand with our citizens while kowtowing to the bullies in these unions?
Kleinman did say he supports bringing starting pay for police and fire from $51,000 to $60,000 to compete with surrounding cities. But both he and Mayor Mike Rawlings voted against across-the-board raises for police. Kleinman went on to criticize the Dallas Police Association for providing legal representation for Officer Amber Geiger.
We have out-of-control associations and unions that close ranks and protect officers. They're really doing more than a disservice to this community, but gunning down members of our community. And we're going to give them a raise. Colleagues, it's shameful. It's shameful. We are now at yet another crossroads in this community between who do we support as a council? Our community, our citizens, our taxpayers, our residents, or just the union bosses who take advantage of a potential mayoral election and council election coming up, take advantage of this council in almost unfathomable ways.
To say anything that would incite violence, that would incite any type of negative reaction towards your public safety and be honest, their public safety and their family members, I think is below. I mean, I don't think he could get any worse. And the fact that the mayor did not in any way, shape, or form tell him that's enough or tell him that isn't useful or isn't reasonable in this officer, I think he failed it too. I think the police and the fire deserve better than that.
Mike Mata said it is not the role of the Dallas Police Association to determine if Officer Geiger is guilty or not guilty, but it is the association's role to provide legal coverage for her because the city does not provide funding for the defense of officers. Today's pay raises were part of the city's approval of the $1.3 billion budget.
Oh, snap. Can I use your phone? So
Any weapons or anything on you?
No, man.
You can drop their phone with Facebook Live and all that stuff down there.
Okay.
I ain't worried about your Facebook. We'll bet you down the street and the guns from
You put us on Snapchat. Are we on live? Yeah. What? We're live?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
We're famous. I got 40 million views on a video of Waco PD.
Was that your video from the apartment? No way.
He's working.
That's too funny, man. I always wondered who put that up. Did he have it like out the window? Like so they could hear?
I almost had to shoot his black ass dude. He started acting, doing all that funny goddamn dancing shit out there, man. What is this? Hang on. Oh, fuck. All this goddamn trash, nasty fucking nigger, dude. Trash. Gotta be some weed in here, dude. That ain't no weed, boy. I'm putting some in here. I swear to God, man. I put that on the squad, man. Uh-oh, jackpot, I found the purse. Fuck is this? Ain't got no goddamn shit in there.
Now he's retired, so now it's like everything's gonna blow over, but he said it while he was still here, so I don't think it was cool.
Some people who live in Fayetteville believe Danny Travis decided to retire the day he was put on suspension so he wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of him allegedly using the N-word towards a black officer.
Just get the easy way out of it. I'm gonna say this and then I'm about to retire. They can't do nothing to me. Kind of the way I feel about it, I can't say anything provocative or anything, but seems like he knew what he was doing, basically.
Others who know Travis personally tell me they believe he's a good guy.
Racial slurs, we don't need them, in this country, but I mean, this day and time, people take stuff probably a little more serious than what we, over the years that we normally have. But
according to this Title VI complaint from police officer Austin McGee, Travis made racial slurs on a 911 phone call. He called Officer McGee the N-word surrounded by profanity. Ward 31 requested the 911 tape and were told we could have it, but it's Monday night and it still hasn't been given to us. City Administrator Scott Collins says he was supposed to meet with Travis Monday morning to decide if he'll continue as fire chief or be terminated.
However, over the weekend, Chief Travis contacted me and requested an earlier meeting at 8:00 a.m., and at which time he wished to submit his retirement letter.
Collins says Travis will receive his full benefits, which will come from taxpayers.
I don't think he should be using him, period. And as far as his benefits, I don't think he deserves to get it. Like, why say something like that? Like, I don't think anyone should use racial slurs and all that.
Danny, I understand he put in 36-some years in the fire department. I mean, he evidently he's done some things right. He served the city as a regular fireman and a chief, too.
That's racist as shit. How is so little white that you can't understand that nigga is racist for a white man to say to a black man? That's fucking racist. Ian, would you say nigga? Would you ever say nigga? No. Corporal would never say nigga. Would you say nigga? Would y'all white people say nigga? Fuck no, they wouldn't say nigga. How dare you? Well, dude, you know what a commoditized word is? Explain it to me. That's a word that's used so many times that it doesn't mean it's original. It's used by black people. It's used by everyone. No, you use it. Don't say everyone. The word has become commoditized so that anyone can